it now or earlier.
Okay. Penny, I am so sorry.
Well,
Um,
that's okay. I kind of stumbled around so that
All right, so I'm going to stumble around now. Thank you, Penny. That was really good. That you did great, and that was a really good talk. I'm going to be talking about the precept. I'll just read the precept to you. We'll just start there. Do not dwell on past mistakes. Create wisdom from ignorance. In the realm of the flawless Dharma, not expounding upon error is the precept of not dwelling on past mistakes. In the Buddha Dharma, there is one path, one Dharma, one realization, one practice. Do not engage in fault finding. Do not condone haphazard talk. So I'm just going to kind of touch on a few things that, as I was studying this, kind of popped out at me this time. And then we can I'm curious about your experience with this precept. So I'd like to have a discussion about that afterwards. But when I'm really informed by, whenever this precept comes up, I'm super informed, excuse me, by the book, Diane Rossetto's book, Waking Up to What You Do, and what she has to say about this precept. And I think I've mentioned it before when we first started talking about the precepts, but she begins her chapter on this precept by quoting T.S. Eliot's The Cocktail Party. And the quote says, "At every meeting, we are meeting a stranger." And I just love that. And then to quote an actual quote from Rossetto about this precept is, "When we meet others as strangers, our hearts are open to possibility, change, and reconciliation. We haven't decided what one another is, and only know that person as she presents herself in this very moment." And I like that because it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to think about when even if you're meeting, somebody that you've known for 20 years or you're married to or whatever. I mean, just the thought that you're meeting that, it's hard. I can imagine. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I can imagine. I know from experience, it's really hard to do, but it's kind of a nice thing to think about as far as practicing this precept goes. Just breaking down the precept, do not dwell on past mistakes, is very straightforward. I think this can apply to the mistakes of other people, as Diane Rossetto talks about, or yourself. A lot of times we dwell on our own past mistakes, and either way, it can be harmful. And then I love the second part of the first line, create wisdom from ignorance. It's kind of just that line just kind of makes me think a lot. Create wisdom from ignorance. Jioshin, when I was talking to her, she mentioned that wisdom in the Buddhist sense means that we are to have a skillful response, that this is her quote, to have a skillful response that lends itself to wholesome karma. So wisdom, so in the moment, sort of being confronted with something and then being, informed by the Dharma, having wisdom to maybe make a choice that creates good karma. One of the things I think about as far as this create wisdom from ignorance, the thing that kind of popped up for me as I was reading about this stuff, the idea of forgiveness came up for me a lot when I was reading about it. The idea of, you've heard the term forgive and forget. Create wisdom from ignorance kind of feels like it's in the same sort of wheelhouse there. So like when you forgive something, when you're truly forgiving somebody, you don't take back the thing that you're forgiving, right? Or even just if you think about the idea of forgiving alone, when the loan is forgiven, that's it. It's in the past and it's no longer a debt. So the same thing goes with emotional baggage that you might have with another person or even with yourself. If you forgive that other person or yourself and let it go, then that's it. It's in the past. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the idea of the Hawaiian practice. I think I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I don't know, but it's Ho'oponopono, and it's a forgiveness practice. And Ho'oponopono roughly means to set things right, and it relates to the importance of forgiveness and letting go. And there's a prayer that goes along with it, which is, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And personally, I kind of like using this prayer as a kind of mantra. If I'm like mad at somebody or if I'm mad at myself, I'll say it to myself. And it really does help to kind of heal whatever suffering I might be having related to not being able to let go of anger for somebody else or anger for myself. So yeah, I kind of think forgiveness is kind of an important aspect of this precept. And then the other part that kind of popped out at me is this line, in the Buddha Dharma, there is one path. And to me, that speaks to this idea that we're all in the same boat, essentially. There's no us versus them. And we're all in the same path, and we're all interconnected, and we're all connected to the same Dharma. Engaging in fault finding creates suffering because it creates separation. We're drawing a line in the sand when we're engaging in fault finding. When you engage in fault finding against yourself, you're sort of drawing a line between the person you are now and the person you are in the past. So you're creating separation there as well. And then just to end this, there's a quote from Reb Anderson's Being Upright that I thought was great. And it's an effective antidote to our tendency to speak of others' faults is the practice of praising and rejoicing in their virtues. And I just kind of think that that's a great practice to work on. So I'm going to try to do that. And I'm kind of curious to hear what your experience is with this precept and how you work with it, and what you've experienced.
I'm glad you mentioned not finding fault with yourself, because that's the hardest part of this precept for me, is not picking at myself all the time.
I
I
think
mean,
so.
I do,
Yeah.
I have to watch it with other people too, but myself is the hardest one.
I agree. Me too. I think it's easy. I mean, we are like our own worst critics, and yeah, it's hard I think the practice of sort of, what was it that I said? Praising and rejoicing virtues. I think that would be hard to do for myself. Just, I don't know why, but yeah.
Child conditioning, most likely.
Mm.
That praising yourself is being arrogant is usually my way, my rationale.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. When
ahead.
I read this precept, I do think of myself more than others. But then when you read on, you know, not fault finding, do not engage in fault finding. And I guess, well, I find fault in myself all the time. And, it's almost like, not recording my talk. It was kind of like, oh, good, it didn't get recorded. Yay. Because I never feel like I do a very good job at a lot of stuff. And But then also there's like gossip and stuff like that, which is finding fault with other people. So thanks. No, I like what you said.
I think one thing that was coming up for me is when that forgiveness piece, letting it go. You know, I think there's probably so many times that you think you have forgiven, you think you have let it go, and then down the road, there's a trigger that brings it up again, and it's this instant of, see, there you go again. You know, so you really didn't forgive, you really didn't let it go. It was just kind of in the moment you thought you did, but it didn't really go anywhere. It was kind of stuck somewhere on a back shelf somewhere, and it easily came back out again.
Yeah,
So
I can think of so many times where I've done that with people and myself too. But for some reason, I really connect with the idea of not engaging in fault finding with people when I read this precept. But it's basically, I think it's the same thing, you know, I mean, just, but yeah, but maybe it's just a process, you know, just, it's a little easier. The fact of like forgiving alone is very like, okay, this is a transactional agreement and it's very businesslike, but the whole idea of forgiving another person is a lot more complicated because there's feelings and yeah, but maybe it's just a process. Like it's something you have to continually just remind yourself of, or, you know.
I think at least for me, as I've gotten older, the things that would really kind of push my buttons or get me upset when I was, you know, younger, I think I definitely have more grace now that I'm older. I think that you know, it's easier for me to look at things and go, that really is no big deal. You know, in the scheme of everything that's going on in our personal lives and the world, it kind of goes to that pick your battles. Some of the things just really don't trip me up like they would have when I was, you know, 20 or 30 and gotten me really riled up. You know, now I can actually say this too will pass. And I think that probably has a little bit to do with my practice also, that as I've been practicing longer, I can really remind myself nothing's permanent, everything's temporary, everything will pass. And so it's easier for me not to really get riled up about something and then have to forgive. So it's easier for me to just let it go.
Yeah, I agree. I'm feeling that way too about for most things, I guess. And then I guess the thing too is that, you know, when things push your buttons, I mean, maybe that's like an opportunity to deal with karma or something, you know, like maybe you can think, I don't know. This is all just kind of popping into my head right now. It's like, you know, maybe when things push your buttons, it's sort of an opportunity for you to realize, okay, well, that's past karma that I maybe need to deal with or something, you know. Does that mean, I hope I'm making sense.
There's a thing that goes with what you were just saying, Moni, which is if somebody's pushing your buttons, my buttons, they are my buttons. It's up to me to diffuse the button. So I was thinking about the create wisdom from ignorance. So I screw up. Hopefully I learn something from that. I mean, maybe I don't do it perfectly next time, but I do it a little bit better. You know, there's a lot of wisdom in there that to create wisdom from ignorance, you know, I screw up and if I can look at it and say, well, what did I do wrong there? What do I want to not do different next time? That would be creating wisdom from ignorance.
I love that.
But as far as the buttons go, I mean, I try, that's part of my mantra of, you know, I have a whole series of things that I practice at different times, but one of them is that if there's a button, if somebody's pushed my button, I need to work on the button. What is that button all about? And I love the Ho'oponopono part too, as far as forgiving myself and everybody else. You know, it's just, God,
Yeah.
it's an ongoing thing, and we get better.
Mhm.
And nobody's perfect, so.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a process. Yeah, and yeah, just going back to the Ho'oponopono, there's something kind of magical about it. Yeah, and if you think about it, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. Like there's all these different parts to it that I don't know, that just kind of connect you to the other person in a way that's beautiful, I think. Because love, you know, when you think about love, love kind of sort of overrides everything. Like it just heals over things, you know. I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you, Ruth.
Oh, no worries. I find sometimes it's hardest to forgive myself. And you're right, I think forgiving is a process. But when I'm ready to fall off to sleep, then I get, why did you say that? Why did you do that? And sometimes it wasn't anything that pertained to that particular day, but something maybe a long time ago. And I think, oh, well, I wasn't doing Zazen then. But still, it'll be, you know, on myself. And I think, okay, being gentle with ourselves because we're human, and sometimes, like you said, love has to factor in, or could
Yeah.
factor in.
Yeah, I think yeah, for sure. I think it does, and compassion and yeah.
I'm kind of doing a time check. Last week, we kind of realized that we just ran out of time and not everybody gets an opportunity to talk. So if there's anybody that hasn't talked, this would be a great time. We have probably about 4 or 5 minutes.
Well, I was gonna say something about the Diane Rosado book that you quoted, Moni. One of the things that was really interesting in that book, and we read it for precepts a couple of years ago, was a technique she described kind of graphically using the metaphor of a trapeze artist. You're swinging back and forth, but at each end you stop. And the swinging, metaphorically, was life. And at the stopping point is where you need to or want to attempt to draw your wisdom and respond with, you know, the proper response. I'm not describing it as nearly as well as she did, but it was something that was kind of helpful for me personally, you know, just to, it reminds me when I was a kid, I had a bad temper. I sometimes still do, not nearly as bad, but my parents would say, count to 10 before you get mad. And I thought, well, okay, I'll just, count to 10, then I can get mad. They never explained that you're counting to 10 to give yourself time to not get mad, you know? So it's the same principle, I think, that Diane Rosado was trying to describe. Just that moment when you can stop and say, okay, I respond with wisdom and kindness, you know, put the anger in your back pocket and keep swinging, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's like Yeah, the pause. I feel like this is my own sort of, I don't know if this is anything that anybody else has ever talked about, but I just feel like, you know, how each precept kind of has this sort of, the first line has this sort of yin yang kind of thing, you know? And there's like there's that little, whatever you call that, symbol in between the two sections. That feels like a pause to me, like just, so do not dwell on past mistakes, pause, create wisdom from ignorance. It's kind of like, that's the moment where you choose the wisdom, you know, like the moment where you pause and decide, okay, I'm going to do this other thing that's not going to create bad karma. By dwelling, you know, dwelling on past mistakes will create bad karma. I love that though. Yeah, it's just, those pauses are really super important. And I think our practice of meditation helps to cultivate that part of our lives.
Well, the pause is important to get you to the right response.
Yes.
We're reading another book for the Guide to Practice by Reb Anderson. And the first line of the book is a question from a student to a high-level teacher. Don't remember the names, but the student asked, what is the essence of Buddhist teaching? And the answer was your response.
Mm.
So that's all it takes to be a good Buddhist, is the right response.
That's
Simple
true.
as that.
Yeah. Because we're trying to create good karma. I mean, that's basically what the precepts, you know, like just this
Yeah.
is how you create good karma. So you can have a good life, happy life, you know, and help others have a happy life.
That's one thing. I like what you said. My dad and mom used to say that too. If you're mad, count to 10 or go outside. If you're really mad, count to 100. It's kind of that pause, and I like that. I didn't think about it in that way, but it is that pause to give you a break to calm down and gather yourself. And is that kind of the pause you were talking about, Dennis, with the trap piece
Yeah.
artist? Go and then you stop, you pause.
Yeah, I like the metaphor. You know, you're swinging and then you stop and then you're swinging back the other way, and it's just
Yeah.
it's
Like
just
that.
a metaphor for what we do in life. You know, we're just
That's
moving through
beautiful.
life, and we have a point where we can stop and take a breath, count to 10, you know, generate a response with wisdom and compassion. That's all we're shooting for.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be so hard. Doesn't sound so hard when you say it like that.
Yeah, I
Doesn't
know.
sound
It's
so hard when you say it like
so
that.
easy. Yeah. I mean, it's,
Easier
yeah,
said than done.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I can't tell you how many times that I wish I would have waited on responding via an email. Like,
Oh.
and even this one, there'll be this little voice that'll say, even if you write the email, Kim, don't send it until tomorrow. And I know that I probably would have had some better karma if I would have listened to that voice many times, because I just respond, or with a text, you just respond. And when Geoshin was telling you, Moni, that about it's that reaction that to actually the purpose is to create better karma. It's like, gosh, how many times could I have waited in responding, been more skillful with that response, and probably had better karma at the end. And I probably it definitely would have came across a little bit more compassionate than it did. Maybe not as harsh, maybe not as blunt, if I just would have slept on it before I hit send.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, what I can't agree more. I just,
That
yes.
pause. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, where we talked about the pause, and I
Yeah.
have it taped across my laptop now.
Oh,
And
good.
tonight I've actually taped a big thing that says record, but I have that
Yeah.
right on my laptop now. Pause, Kim.
I love that. That's a good It's so simple, but it's a good reminder, like just to have, I'm gonna do that too, I think.
All right, we are 1 minute past, 1 minute past our time, so I'm gonna close this out if everybody would. Okay, abiding in this ephemeral world like a lotus in muddy water. The mind is pure and goes beyond, thus we bow to Buddha. All Buddhas throughout space and time. I always get stuck here. All honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha, prajna, parasita. I say that all the time at home, but as soon as I have to say it with all of you guys, I get tongue-tied. Thank you, everybody.
Good night,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you. Good
Good
night.
evening.
Thank you.
Money, do you want me to bring the books to the library? Back to the library?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, sure. That'd be
You're gonna
perfect.
be there tomorrow, I mean?
I will be there tomorrow.
Great. Okay.
Okay, we'll see you
Good
then.
night, everybody. Trish, have a safe trip.
Bye.
Whoop, she's
Yeah.
gone.
She's gone. Penny, I am so sorry. I feel horrible.
Oh, don't, it's okay. It's okay. Really, it wasn't that good a talk anyway.
Oh, I thought it was great, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I did. I thought you did a really great job. So, yeah. So I'm really bummed, but I guess it's just one of those things. No fault finding, Kim. No fault finding.
Yeah, don't dwell on past mistakes.
That's
And
right.
that's the kind of thing that I do more than, I mean, I find fault with myself way more than I find fault with other people.
Yeah.
But
Really.
except for certain people like my ex-husband, or, that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, have a
All
great.
right. Thank
Okay.
you for hosting.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.